There are places where the official story is so clean, so perfect, so thoroughly documented that you know it's a lie. Gary, Indiana is one of those places. They have reports. They have statistics. They have economic data explaining exactly why a city of 178,000 people became a city of 69,000 in 40 years. Steel industry collapsed. Jobs disappeared. People relocated for work. Perfect explanation. Except for one detail they don't mention in the reports. Everyone left at the same time. I only share these with people who listen carefully, with people who understand that some evacuations aren't announced. Some disasters aren't declared. Some cities are abandoned for reasons that never make the news. My name is Thomas Hartley. In the spring of 1982, I was assigned to conduct environmental assessments for the EPA in the Rust Belt. Gary was on my list. The steel mills were shutting down. The government wanted documentation of environmental impact, standard procedure for industrial collapse. I was told I'd be documenting a dying city, slow economic death, gradual population decline, normal Rust Belt story. Nobody told me I'd be documenting an evacuation. Gary, Indiana was built by U.S. Steel in 1906. Built from nothing, planned city, company town. At its peak, it produced 30% of America's steel. The mills ran 24/7, 3 shifts, constant production, constant noise, constant fire and smoke, and the sound of industry powering a nation. By 1982, most of the mills had closed. U.S. Steel was scaling back operations. The city was bleeding population. Standard decline. Expected. Documented. Explained. But when I arrived on April 12, 1982, I found something else. Something the reports didn't capture. Something the statistics couldn't explain. I found a city in the middle of running away. The EPA had arranged temporary housing for me. A motel on Broadway, near the center town. When I checked in, the clerk looked at me strangely. "How long you staying?" he asked. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. Why? Environmental assessment. The mills. He laughed. Dark laugh. No humor. You're assessing what's already dead. Or what should be dead. Or what we wish was dead. He handed me a key. Room 23. Don't open the windows at night. Don't go near the mills after dark. And if you hear the sound, the low sound, the one you feel more than here, get in your car and drive. Don't pack. Don't hesitate. Just drive. What sound? You'll know it when you feel it. Everyone does. He turned away. Most people leave after the first night. The ones who stay, well, they're not staying by choice anymore. I dismissed it as local pessimism, economic depression manifesting as superstition. I'd heard similar warnings in other dying industrial towns. Always the same. Always about sounds or shadows or things that used to be normal but weren't anymore. I spent the first day driving through Gary, documenting, photographing, taking notes, and immediately noticed the wrongness, the inconsistency, the thing that didn't match the official narrative of slow economic decline. Houses abandoned midlife, not boarded up, not foreclosed over months, just abandoned, doors standing open, cars in driveways with keys in the ignition, laundry on lines, toys in yards, like people had walked away in the middle of normal days and never returned. Entire blocks were empty, not gradually emptied, simultaneously emptied. I could see the pattern. Neighborhoods that had been occupied in early April showed signs of sudden mass departure. All at once. All together. Like something had happened that made everyone decide to leave at the exact same moment. Schools had closed without warning. I found one elementary school with the doors unlocked. Inside, classrooms were frozen in time. Papers on desks. Books open. Lunch trays still on tables in the cafeteria. Like everyone, teachers, students, staff, had simply stood up and walked out in the middle of a school day. The date on the blackboard, April 6, 1982. 6 days ago. I photographed everything, documented the abandonment, tried to find rational explanations, tried to match what I was seeing with official reports of gradual economic migration. Failed completely. This wasn't economic migration. This was evacuation. Rapid, unplanned, desperate, but evacuation from what? The mills were closed. The jobs were gone. What could make thousands of people flee simultaneously? What could make them leave everything behind? As sunset approached, I returned to the motel. The clerk was still there, same position, like he hadn't moved all day. "You went to the mills," he said. Not a question. Drove past them. Didn't see anything unusual. Just abandoned industrial buildings. "You went during the day." Everything's normal during the day. It's nighttime that's wrong. That's when they wake up. That's when it starts. When what starts? He looked at me with tired eyes. Eyes that had seen something. Eyes that knew something. The calling. The sound. The thing that came out of the mills when they shut down. Or maybe it was always there. Maybe we just never noticed it when the machines were running. When the noise of production covered up the other noise. The older noise. The one that shouldn't exist. You're saying something supernatural. I'm saying Gary didn't die because the steel industry collapsed. The steel industry collapsed because Gary was dying, because something was killing it, because the mills stopped making steel and started making something else, started operating for a different purpose, started calling workers back, not for shifts, not for production, for something else, something worse. He handed me earplugs, industrial grade, the kind workers use in the mills. "Wear these tonight. Sleep with the men. And if you feel vibration, if you feel your bones humming, if you feel your teeth buzzing, if you feel something pulling at you from the direction of the mills, resist it. Don't go to the windows. Don't look at the factories. Don't listen to what they're calling you to do." I took the earplugs, went to my room. Didn't believe him. Didn't believe any of it. Just another Rust Belt ghost story. Just economic anxiety manifesting as supernatural fear. Then the sun set, and at 11:47 p.m., I felt it. Not a sound. Not at first. A vibration. Deep, subsonic. Too low to hear, but impossible to ignore. Coming up through the ground. Through the building's foundation. Through the bed I was lying on. Through my bones. Making everything hum. Making my teeth chatter. Making my heart beat irregularly. Making something in my brain light up with wrong signals, with impossible sensations, with the overwhelming need to go outside, to walk toward the mills, to answer whatever was calling. I put in the earplugs, covered my head with a pillow, tried to block it out. Couldn't. The vibration wasn't sound. It was something else, something that bypassed ears and went straight to the nervous system, straight to the primitive parts of the brain, straight to the parts that responded to predators, to danger, to things that hunted in the dark. The calling lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of fighting the urge to leave my room, to walk to the mills, to join whatever was happening there, to become part of whatever Gary had become. At 2:47 a.m., it stopped. Sudden silence, sudden stillness, like someone had shut off a machine, like whatever had been calling had finished its work for the night, like it had gotten what it needed, or taken who it wanted. I stayed in bed until dawn. Didn't sleep, couldn't sleep, just listened to the silence, the wrong silence, the silence of a city that should have traffic and voices and life, but instead had nothing, just empty buildings and empty streets, and the waiting presence of whatever lived in the mills. If stories like this don't bother you, you probably haven't heard enough of them. Haven't felt what it's like when a city stops being a place people live and becomes something else, something that calls, something that takes, something that empties neighborhoods and closes schools and makes 100,000 people run. The next morning, I drove to the EPA regional office in Chicago. 3 hours. I needed to talk to my supervisor, needed to report what I'd seen, needed to understand what was really happening in Gary. My supervisor was a man named Robert Chun, 15 years with the EPA, professional, rational, not the type to believe in ghost stories or industrial hauntings. I told him about the abandoned houses, the school frozen in time, the vibration at night, the calling. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. You felt it, he finally said. You know about this? Gary's been on our watch list since 1978, not for environmental reasons, for other reasons. Reasons we don't put in official reports. Reasons that get filed in different departments under different classifications. What departments? The ones that handle anomalous events. The ones that respond to situations that don't fit normal categories. The ones that manage evacuations without declaring them. He pulled out a file. Thick, classified, stamped with clearances I didn't have. Gary's population started declining rapidly in late 1977. Not gradually. Rapidly. Thousands of people per month. They told us it was economic. Steel industry downturn. We believed them. Until we sent assessors. Until those assessors reported the same things you're reporting. Abandoned homes. Mass departures. And the sound. What is the sound? We don't know. Best theory is that the mills, when they shut down, when the machine stopped, something else started. Some frequency. Some vibration. Some signal that human nervous systems respond to. Not consciously. Instinctively. It triggers flight response. Triggers the overwhelming need to evacuate. To leave. To run. But you said it calls people back. The motel clerk said it does both. Pushes some people away. Pulls others closer. We don't understand the pattern. Don't know why some people flee. And others feel compelled to approach. But the ones who approach. He trailed off. They don't come back. Or when they do, they're different. Change. Wrong somehow. The government should evacuate everyone. Close the city. Quarantine the area. The government is evacuating everyone. Just not officially. Not publicly. We're facilitating relocation. Offering incentives. Making it easy for people to leave. But we can't force it. Can't declare emergency without explaining why. And we can't explain why because we don't understand what's happening. How many people are left? Official census says 151,000. Actual occupied residences suggest maybe 90,000, and dropping daily. We estimate Gary will be effectively empty within 5 years, maybe sooner. The sound is getting stronger. The calling is becoming more effective. More people are responding. Some people tell me they've heard stories like this near where they live. If something about this feels familiar, you're not alone. Robert gave me new instructions. Document the exodus. Track which neighborhoods emptied first. Map the pattern. Try to determine if the evacuation radiated from a specific point. Try to understand the mechanism. And avoid the mills at night. At all costs. Never approach them after dark. Never answer the calling. Never try to see what's inside. I returned to Gary that afternoon. Started mapping. Started documenting. Started seeing the pattern. The evacuation radiated outward from the U.S. Steel Gary Works, the largest mill complex. The closest neighborhoods emptied first. The furthest neighborhoods were still partially occupied. A clear radius of effect. A clear zone of influence spreading outward from the mills, like ripples from a stone dropped in water. But the evacuation wasn't uniform. Some buildings in the affected zones were still occupied. Some families had stayed. I interviewed 3 of them, asked why they hadn't left when their neighbors did. All 3 said the same thing. We can't. We tried, but something won't let us. We get to the city limits, and we have to turn back. Something pulls us. Something needs us here. Something in the mills is waiting for us. They were pale, thin, exhausted. They didn't sleep well, had dark circles under their eyes, spoke in monotones, like people under sedation, like people who'd given up fighting, like people who knew they were going to die, but had accepted it, had surrendered to it, had stopped resisting the inevitable. I asked them about the sound, about the calling. They all heard it, every night, starting at 11:47 p.m., ending at 2:47 a.m. 3 hours of vibration, 3 hours of feeling pulled toward the mills, 3 hours of resisting the urge to walk into the darkness and join whatever was happening there. What do you think is happening there? I asked one of them, a woman in her 50s who'd worked at the mills for 20 years, looked at me with hollow eyes. The machines are still running. We can see it from our windows. Lights turning on, smoke rising, sounds of production. But nobody's working. Nobody's operating anything. The mills are running themselves, making something. We don't know what, but it's not steel. It's something else. Something that needs us, that calls to us, that wants us to join the process, to become part of what's being made. That night, I set up monitoring equipment near the Gary Works, positioned cameras, set up audio recorders, seismic sensors to measure the vibration. I wanted data, evidence, proof of what was happening. At 11:47 p.m., everything activated. The mills lit up, not all of them, just sections, specific buildings, specific furnaces, lights turning on in sequence. Deliberate, purposeful, not random power fluctuations. Controlled activation. Smoke began rising, not the normal smoke of steel production. Something darker, thicker, moving wrong, against the wind, rising in spirals, in patterns, in shapes that looked almost like symbols, almost like writing, almost like communication. And the sound started, the vibration. My equipment registered it immediately. 18 hertz, below normal human hearing range, but powerful, sustained, rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat, like breathing, like something alive calling to something else alive. I felt it in my bones, felt it in my teeth, felt pulling, not physically, mentally, psychologically, the overwhelming urge to approach, to enter the mills, to see what was making the light, what was making the smoke, what was calling. I watched my cameras, watched the main entrance to the Gary Works, watched figures approaching, maybe a dozen, walking slowly, deliberately, all from different directions, all converging on the same point, all answering the call. They walked through the gates, into the darkness, into the active areas, into the buildings that should have been empty but weren't, that should have been dead but were alive, that should have been abandoned but were operating. None of them came back out. At 2:47 a.m., everything shut off. Lights went dark. Smoke stopped. Vibrations ceased. The mills went silent. Dead. Normal. But I had footage. I had readings. I had evidence of impossibility, of industrial facilities operating without power, without workers, without any rational explanation. I retrieved my equipment, reviewed the footage. The audio was clear. The vibration was documented. The lights were captured. The people walking in were visible. But when I played back the footage from inside the fence, from cameras positioned to capture the interior, I saw nothing. Just empty buildings, dark spaces, abandoned structures, no lights, no smoke, no people. Like, whatever was happening inside existed in a frequency my cameras couldn't capture, in a dimension my equipment couldn't measure, in a reality that bypassed normal documentation. I spent 2 more weeks in Gary, documenting, measuring, watching the city empty day by day, watching families load possessions into cars and drive away without looking back, watching businesses close, watching neighborhoods die. The pattern was accelerating. The zone of effect was expanding. Areas that had been stable were now evacuating. The radius was growing. The calling was getting stronger. The mills were taking more people, claiming more territory, spreading like an infection through the city's infrastructure. On my last night, I made a mistake. The same mistake others had made. I got too close. I wanted to see inside. Wanted to understand what was really happening. Wanted to know what the mills were producing, what they were calling people to do, what they were building, what they were becoming. At 11:47 p.m., when the activation started, I approached the fence. Not inside, just close. Close enough to see through the gates. Close enough to see into the illuminated sections. Close enough to witness. The vibration was overwhelming. The calling was impossible to resist. Every nerve in my body screamed to run toward the mills, to enter, to join, to become part of whatever was happening inside those buildings, whatever was operating those machines, whatever was making those lights and that smoke And that sound, I held the fence, used it to anchor myself, fought the urge, and watched. Through the gates, I saw them, the people who'd walked in, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, standing in formation, arranged in precise patterns, around machines that were operating, around furnaces that were burning, around processes that were running without human operation, without human control, without human purpose. They weren't working. They were just standing, perfectly still, perfectly positioned, like components, like parts of a machine, like they'd been integrated into the process itself, become part of the production, become part of whatever the mills were making. And I saw what they were making, saw it being formed in the furnaces, saw it being shaped on the assembly lines, saw it being constructed piece by machines operating themselves while humans stood witness, while humans provided something else, something the machines needed that wasn't labor, wasn't skill, something else entirely, presence, consciousness, life force, something that made the production more than mechanical, that made it purposeful, that made it alive. The mills weren't making steel anymore. They were making something else, something that needed human witnesses, human participation, human presence to exist, to function, to grow. I ran, back to my car, back to the motel, packed everything, drove to Chicago without stopping, never looked back, never returned. I filed my report, documented everything except the truth, said environmental conditions were severe, said population decline was rapid and ongoing, said the mills should be demolished and the site should be remediated, standard recommendations, nothing that would raise questions, nothing that would require explanation. My supervisor accepted the report, filed it, sealed it, and told me Gary was being redesignated, no longer an environmental assessment site. Now it was something else, something under different jurisdiction, something managed by departments that didn't officially exist. What's going to happen to Gary? I asked. What's already happening. Managed evacuation, facilitated decline. In 5 years, maybe 10, the city will be effectively empty. Then we'll fence it, zone it as hazardous, prevent reoccupation, let the mills run themselves, let them make whatever they're making, as long as they stay contained, as long as they don't spread beyond the current radius, as long as they only take the people who answer the calling. You're leaving them there, the people inside. We're not leaving them. They're already gone. Whatever walked into those mills isn't human anymore, isn't anything we can save, isn't anything we can help. They're part of the process now, part of the production, part of whatever Gary has become. That was 42 years ago. Gary's population today is 69,093, down from 178,320 in 1960. The official explanation is economic decline, steel industry collapse, white flight, urban decay, standard Rust Belt story. But I know the truth. I know why entire neighborhoods emptied in days. I know why schools closed mid-year. I know why families left meals on tables and cars in driveways. I know why the population didn't decline gradually over decades, but collapsed rapidly over years. Because Gary wasn't dying. Gary was being evacuated, systematically, quietly, without announcement, without declaration, without anyone explaining why people needed to leave, why staying was dangerous, why the mills were still operating even though they were officially closed. The calling continues. I've spoken to people who grew up in Gary, who left decades ago, who moved hundreds of miles away. They still feel it sometimes. Late at night, the vibration, the pulling, the urge to return, to go back to Gary, to walk to the mills, to answer what's calling, what's waiting, what's still producing. They say cities die slowly, gradually, over generations, economic decline, population shift, natural evolution. But Gary didn't fade. Gary emptied. Gary was evacuated. Gary was abandoned for reasons the government won't explain and can't admit. They say the steel mills shut down because the industry collapsed, because foreign competition, because changing economics, because natural market forces, But steel mills don't operate themselves. Don't light up at night without power. Don't call the people. Don't take workers who never come back. So the question isn't why people left Gary. The question is why no one was ever allowed to return. Why the population continues to decline even now. Why entire sections of the city remain empty. Why cameras are positioned watching the mills. Why certain streets are permanently closed. Why the EPA maintains a monitoring station that officially doesn't exist. Why satellites track the city. Why the government facilitates departure but prevents reoccupation. Why Gary has become a city in managed collapse. Controlled abandonment. Supervised evacuation. A city dying not because the economy failed, but because something woke up in the factories. Something that didn't need workers anymore. Something that needed witnesses. Something that needed presence. Something that needed the city itself. Needed Gary. Needed to transform it. Needed to claim it. Needed to make it into something else. There are more places like this. Places where industry left behind more than pollution. Places where factories stopped making products and started making something else. Places where machines continued operating long after the workers left. Places where the calling continues, where the vibration pulses, where the evacuation never officially happened, but the city emptied anyway. I only talk about them with people who understand, with people who know that some industrial collapses aren't economic. Some abandonments aren't voluntary. Some cities don't die. They're killed by what they created, by what they built, by what they woke up. If you've been to Gary, if you felt the vibration, if you've heard the calling, if you've seen the mills light up when they shouldn't, if you've known someone who went back and didn't return the same, leave a comment. Some stories don't stay buried. They can't. They're still happening, still calling, still taking. And Gary is still emptying, still evacuating, still running from what lives in the mills. Still waiting for the last person to leave, for the city to become completely empty, for the process to complete, for whatever is being made to finish. The factories were just the excuse. The steel was just the cover story. The economic collapse was just the explanation we could give without admitting the truth, that sometimes the machines don't need us to operate them. Sometimes they operate us. Sometimes they make us part of production. Part of the process, part of what they're building. And sometimes a city isn't abandoned. It's evacuated, not from disaster, but from transformation, from becoming something else, something that calls, something that takes, something that still operates in the darkness while everyone pretends it's just empty industrial ruins. Gary, Indiana. Population declining. Steel mills closed. Economic disaster. Official story. The truth is written in the empty houses, in the abandoned schools, in the families who ran, in the people who can't return, in the vibration that continues, in the calling that never stops, in the mills that still light up, still smoke, still operate, still make, still take, still waiting for the last witness, the last presence, the last piece of whatever they're building in the darkness where a city used to be.